Welcome, everybody, to a very impromptu episode of Shoot the Gap. I'm your host, Jorge Edwards. With me, I got Justin Taylor. And tonight, we're going to be talking about some IDP Fantasy Football, specifically an Our Guys episode for the 2024 IDP Fantasy Football season. So let's get right to it. So did you notice that I turned down the volume for our intro music? Because I feel like every time, and this is not just for this show, it's for all the shows, when I made the videos, it was like, quiet, or relatively moderate sounding host. And then, oh my God, Jesus Christ, loud music for the intro. And so I'm sparing all your ears here, people who are tuning in for Shoot the Gab and for JT. So JT, man, how you doing, buddy?
Doing good. Been a long day, crazy day. Got a win today in fifth grade tackle football, 6-0.
Nice.
So pumped about that. 4-0 on the season. Been trying to catch up on college football. I was lucky. A lot of my teams played on Thursday night. So I got me and Toast, who hosts Around the Ice here on Fantasy and Frames, our hockey show. We actually got together and watched a lot of the Thursday night games. So that was fun. And then catching up on a couple other teams that I follow closely here in the kind of the night games here. So, but love to see college football back. I'm a big college football fan, but we're now less than a week away from the NFL season. I'm already starting to set lineups. I'm getting ready. I'm making sure I'm ahead of the curve. I've got way more teams than I've ever had this year. So I'm like, I'm going to start setting lineups like right away and then going back and adjusting if I have to make sure I don't miss anything.
Yeah, no, same. I have most of my home leagues done that are IDP and offense mixed. I have one more to go on Monday night. And then, sigh of relief. Drafts are done. Now it's time to set lineups. I do want to make a comment, though, on Around the Ice, the fantasy hockey show we have here. So I downloaded the YouTube music app the other day, and I typed in fantasy hockey sorting by podcasts. And Around the Ice is the number 2 popping up fantasy hockey podcast here on YouTube Music. So definitely tune into them on Tuesday nights. Just they've been doing such a great job getting you ready at the various positions, going tier by tier, getting you ready for your fantasy hockey season.
And
so
now we're going to go division by division the next couple weeks. So be ready.
Okay.
We're going to break it down. Fantasy, but real life, what we think is going to happen, and with a little bit of betting mixed in, who we're picking to win the division, over under win totals, that stuff. So we got all that coming up over the next 4 weeks. We're going to break down everything on Tuesday nights at 9 Eastern, 8 Central here on Fantasy and Frames.
Love it. And for folks who are watching on X and on Facebook, give us a follow at Fantasy and Frames. Let us know that you like the content, or maybe you want to let us know what you want us to change and address. You can see all our socials on our new overlays here on the screen. And if you're on YouTube, tuning us in for the first time, just hit that subscribe button, the notification bell, and you'll get notified whenever Fantasy and Frames puts out awesome content here. So with that, let's just let's get into it. Let's talk about some of our guys, and let's get to one that you and I are both super, super high on. Late last night, I was actually writing a IDP redraft target profile on him, and I was going through all his stats, and I was going through all the, the reports out of various training camp beat reporters. Devin Witherspoon, slot cornerback for the Seattle Seahawks. I am of the belief that this guy can be a starter in defensive back only leagues, not just cornerback specific leagues. What are your thoughts on this?
All right. People that know me, I live right near 10 minutes away from the University of Illinois. Devin Witherspoon, unreal story, a 0-star recruit coming out of high school, got into football late. When JUCO route, ended up Illinois, just worked his tail off. Guy is an absolute dog. Ends up being a top 5 pick in the NFL draft, which is just amazing. He's awesome. And I have to tell you, he's a cornerback but he does a little bit of everything, and the way that the Seattle defense uses him, I legit this is my crazy take for this year, and that's why he's one of my guys. I think Devin Witherspoon, even with cornerback designation, can end up being number one defensive back in fantasy IDP this year. I really do. I think the way that they're going to blitz him, the way they're going to use him, he's a guy comes up, makes tackles. He loves hitting. You never see that out of cornerbacks. They want to trip the ankle. They don't want to come up and do contact. They're fancy guys. They're the fancy guys of the defense, just like the wide receivers. They don't want to get dirty. That's not Devin Witherspoon. He wants to get dirty. He wants to get in your face. He wants to come up and hit. I think they're going to use him a ton of different ways. He got off to a slow start last year, hurt most of training camp, but man, when he got in there, boom, he was lightning in a bottle. He ended up having a great fantasy IDP season and a real life NFL season. And I think he's just scratching the surface. I mean, this guy, he's only got about 6-7 years of total football that he's ever played. I mean, it's crazy. I think he has legit huge upside. We were actually just looking at this in my DLF rankings for my IDP. I am way higher on Devin Witherspoon than everyone else. They're like, JT, like that's to call you out there, but they're like, why do you have this guy like 40 spots higher than everyone else? I was like, I just think he's legit. I think he could be the number one defensive back. He plays everywhere. I love him. So he's definitely one of my guys. People in the know are taking him, but people that are like kind of paying attention, still sleeping on him. You could still get him at a really reasonable cost, especially in a defensive back only like league where you're not playing cornerback. If you're playing in a cornerback league with cornerback premium, I will tell you those types of leagues, people are on him. He is going early. There's a couple leagues I thought I was going to jump on him way early, and I got beat to him. And people are like already on him. So those leagues are going to be hard to get. But he's one of the few guys that lists as a cornerback that I think you can absolutely count on playing him as a full-time defensive back because I think he's going to be more than a cornerback. I just love what he brings. And if you listen to the Seattle coaching staff, they are planning on doing a little bit of everything. He reminds me of what Tampa was talking about last year with Antoine Winfield when they were talking about like, hey, he's going to play free safety, but he's also going to play strong safety. We're also going to blitz him. We're also going to play him in the flat. And they're like, we're just going to move him around a lot. And I think that's the really cool thing about NFL coaches these days. Right. They're not locked into this mindset of like, he's a free safety. He's a corner. I can only play him there. They're starting to realize defensively, you have to have like an offensive mind. Who are my best players? How do I utilize them? Where can I move them and get advantages? Defensive coaches are starting to do that. And I think it makes a big difference with some of these DBs. And we saw it with Michael Parsons, like linebacker. They took guys a linebacker, made him a defensive end, and just realized, let's just move him around and play him wherever we can use them. And I think that's where defenses are starting to evolve in the NFL. And that's why I like these guys like Devin Witherspoon. I want guys that are dogs that can do everything and want to do everything. They're not back there going, I just want to lock on a guy in man coverage. He don't want to do that. He wants to come up. He wants to hit. He can do it. I'm not saying he can't. He can be a shutdown quarter. He was in college. But I think he can do a little bit of everything. And I think the coaching staff realize just having him cover a guy one-on-one at cornerback is not utilizing all his abilities.
So I a little spoiler ahead for people who haven't read the article yet, but if you haven't, go to fantasyandframes.com and check out all of our IDP redraft target articles. One of the things about Devin Witherspoon is, you remember, Mike McDonald, he's coming from Baltimore. And do you remember what they did with a certain guy who finished as the DB1 in most formats, Kyle Hamilton, for a majority of the season? They
Absolutely.
played him everywhere. He took the best player they had in the secondary and made him do everything. So it's not shocking that Kyle Hamilton finished in a lot of formats as the defensive back one in points per game. Flash forward now, McDonald is in Seattle. Don't let whoever the defensive coordinator fool you. It's McDonald who's calling the defense. He's, and he's going to do what he's familiar with. He's going to put his best cornerback in all these positions. when researching just how good Witherspoon is, I had this preconceived notion in my head, like I'm sure a lot of people out there who play IDP Fantasy Football do, that it's the safeties, the box safeties who get all the tackle opportunities because they're assisting in run support and they're the de facto linebackers. That's why they're always going to have the edge on cornerbacks. And to a certain degree, I still think that is a viable narrative. But I wrote in the article, it would take somebody who's great at tackling, helping in the run, helping in applying pressures, playing as great coverage cornerbacks, making plays all over the field for somebody who is just a specific cornerback, become a DB1 overall in fantasy. Oh, wait, hold on. That's Devin Witherspoon.
Mm-hmm.
I was looking at his tackle rates, both in coverage as a slot corner, as well as just playing the run. Close to double digits, 10% tackle rates. It was right there on the border, like 9.5, 9.9. The guy even had a great pressure rate last year. I mean, he was number 2 amongst all cornerbacks in total pressures with 10 and had 3 sacks on the season. So literally, Mike Macdonald is going to take this guy and tell him to do everything. Blitz the quarterback, play in slot coverage, and assist in run support. And assuming he stays healthy, which is, again, there are many things you can call into the discussion as far as, what is it going to be, causing some statistical regression. And I'm sure there's going to be some regression here and there, but the guy just does so much that I feel like any type of regression that you might see early on is just going to be phased out just because of the sheer number of ways he can make plays on the field and thus get you fantasy points. So I'm 100% all in on Devin Witherspoon, even in defensive back leagues. I think I'm right there with you there.
Depending on the scoring, I looked at a bunch of leagues that I'm in that have pretty similar scoring, but some was slightly different. He was the number 1 average points per game cornerback. He missed 3 games last year. He was number 1 average points per game out of every cornerback in all my leagues. And overall defensive backs, counting safeties, points per game, he was anywhere from 3 to 5 in overall average points per game. That's why I think people they're missing the boat on him. I mean, yes, he's a cornerback, but man, he finished in the top 5 as a safety, all DBs last year. And like I said, if you're in a cornerback start league, I'm all over him. He's going to give me safety / linebacker numbers for point totals. So I'm all over that. And if you're in any kind of premium, I have to be honest, I'm in the IDP Plus charity league. We just got done drafting. I had Devin Witherspoon all lined up. I was pumped. I was like, I'm going to take him way early. I don't even care. I'm taking him way early. And you know what? I got sniped. He didn't even get to me. I was actually trying to pull it up in my league to figure out where he went because he went early. And I was like, and I looked at it and I was like, man, that could win this league. Because anybody that's ever played in the league, they have a high cornerback premium in that league. And I was like, I was so mad at myself. I was like, I knew I should have went 1 round earlier. I'm looking right now. Gosh, where'd he come off the board? It was way earlier than I thought. There was only a couple defensive players that went before. He went number 1007 to Timothy Greathouse. Timothy Greathouse. I literally was 5 picks away, and I had him lined up right before him. This tells you how high he went. Right before him, Aiden Hutchinson, Nick Bosa, Bobby Okereke, Micah Parsons, Zaire Franklin. Those were the guys that went in front of him. About 10 picks before that were Myles Garrett, Max Crosby, TJ, Roquan Smith, Oladugu. He was right there. I mean, I had it lined up and the run happened. I was at the end of the round and I missed it. And I was mad at myself that I didn't go. I actually went linebacker with Roquan and Oladugu. I went them 8-12, 9-01 thinking, all right, I started the defensive run. I grabbed those guys. Somebody grabbed TJ Watt right before me. I started the run, took those 2 guys. I'm like, I'm coming run back, and I'm going to take Witherspoon right away because I'm like, I don't care. I'm going to take Witherspoon, and I'm going to take DeForest Buckner. And you know what? Both of them went right in front of me. So
long story short, Devin Witherspoon is is amazing.
Yeah.
And for
He's a
those who
guy
play
you
on
got to be on
Sleeper,
your
his
radar.
ADP
Yep.
went around defensive back 10. That should tell you how the community feels about him also. No, 100%. I hear you, man. Like, I think the moment they drafted him, I started to think this is the reincarnation of the Legion of Boom. They just addressed it right then and there. So looking forward to seeing how he develops.
And
Let's
he's
talk
just
about
a
another
player.
guy. And you
He's
mentioned the
got a chip
Indianapolis
on the
Colts.
shoulder. You know what I mean? He's got
What's
that
up?
chip on the shoulder. He's never been
Hmm.
a guy that people are like, oh, you're awesome. You're great. He's had to work for everything he's ever got. He's had to earn every position, every playing time. He's got that chip on his shoulder, and I don't think it's going away. Just because he got taken in the top 5, he's not a prima donna. This guy is going to work his tail off. And I just, that's what I love about him. It's just a great story. He's a great kid. I just hope that he has a fantastic career. I love him for IDP purposes, but I just love him as a person. He's a great guy. I just hope that he has a fantastic career.
100%. And you mentioned the team, the Indianapolis Colts. And there's a player who's a rookie that is one of my guys this year who I think also has a chip on his shoulder, and that's Liatu Latu, the edge rusher out of UCLA. Samson Ebukam had I believe it was a torn something. He's out for the season. And Liatu Latu is sliding right in there as the right defensive end opposite Kwity Paye. You look at what he did at UCLA his last 2 seasons, coming off of that neck injury that people were really concerned about in terms of whether or not he was going to be able to play football again. And then he comes back. And not only does he play, he plays well. He's like one of the best edge rushers in terms of creating pressures and accumulating sacks in the entire rookie class this year. And now here you go. What was the one thing that a lot of people were talking about when he went to Indy? Well, Indy, they like to rotate their defensive ends. Well, now they don't have that luxury anymore. Now he has to play this amount of time. And I just feel, the sky is going to be the limit. You have DeForest Buckner in the middle. So it's almost giving him like a cheat code. Like we talk about Caleb Williams on offense, how he has a cheat code because he has all these great offensive weapons around him. He has a guy by the name of DeForest Buckner, who, again, one of those players you could also consider my guy in the fact that he's a defensive tackle, but still could be taken in defensive lineman only leagues just because the guy just racks up points in terms of solo tackles and pressures, or solo tackles and tackles for loss. But he has DeForest Buckner kind of, eating up space, as well as what he does, which is also get to the quarterback, which means Liatu Latu is going to get a lot of one-on-one opportunities against offensive linemen. And I think this guy's for real. I had him as my number 1 ranked rookie defensive lineman coming out of in the draft. Yeah, he's definitely one of my guys again. And again, people knocked him. People knocked him down, in their pre-draft process because of that neck injury. And he was the first, defensive lineman edge rusher who was taken in the draft this year. And I think that's for a great reason. The snaps are going to be there. That's one of the things about IDP Fantasy Football, folks, is that we could talk about efficiency. We could talk about, how consistent they are with, sacks and tackles for a loss and you name it. The number 1 predictor of fantasy football success, IDP fantasy football success, is snap percentage. Obviously, you have to be on the field a lot to get those opportunities, to make those plays. That is the only variable that there's a direct correlation between that and success playing and success in being a good fantasy football player. So, yeah, Liatu Latu, love him. What are your thoughts on Liatu Latu, JT?
I agree 100%. I like Latu a ton. I just think if it wasn't for the injury and people worrying about pre-draft, there's no way this guy goes outside the top 10. I think the Colts absolutely got a steal at 15. I mean, absolute steal. I had Junior Colson. I love Junior Colson. I just think he's a CJ Mosley type of player. I had him as my number one ranked IDP rookie player, but I had Latu number 2. And they were right next to each other. I think Latu's probably more dynamic than Colson. I just think Colson feels like a guy that can have a 10, 12-year run and just be really solid for his whole career. But Latu, I tell you what, I always say this, I never wish injuries on guys, but the injury really helped him out. Now the coaching staff doesn't have to work him in. They're like, oh, okay, now we have to play him. So it's going to be Kwity Paye, it's going to be Latu, and then Adebayo is going to be the guy that rotates with those two guys. So instead of having a 4-man rotation, they're going to have a 3-man rotation. And really, Adebayo, he's a guy, really nice numbers when he comes in. He's going to be the change of pace guy that comes in and just gives those guys a break when they need it. I think they're going to play Latu a ton. Man, I think he has a fantastic shot at winning Rookie of the Year, Defensive Rookie of the Year. I really do. I think the Colts are going to be in a lot of shootouts. I think they're going to need the pass rush, and they had for no one having huge sack numbers on the Colts last year. I can't remember if it was they set a team record or it was close to a team record for most sacks in a season. And they've had some great sack artists on this team. I mean, you got to talk about Robert Mathis, Dwight Freeney. I mean, some just absolute studs. But as a team, even though they didn't have anybody in double-digit sacks, as a team, they actually were really good last year, putting pressure on the quarterback. I think Kwity Paye is going to step up this year, and I actually think Latu on the other side is going to help him. I think a lot of teams are going to start looking at him. I know it's preseason. We always talk like, don't get too ahead of yourself on preseason. But man, he looked good. He was putting moves on guys. He was power rushing guys. Every time he was in there, you were like, whoa, oh, almost got him again. He either got a sack or he was like on the quarterback. I like him a ton. Like I said, if it wasn't for the injury concerns in college, I think there's no way he lasts to 15. I think he's a top 5 pick. It just happened to be that year where things happened and he dropped. But man, I think he, bar none, has the most pure athletic rush ability in this draft. I really do. So I think you're right. And as I say with a lot of guys, get on him now before it's too late. Before it's too late and you go into next season and he's getting drafted like crazy high, or you try to trade for him and, you got to spend the moon on him. I surprisingly, a couple IDP leagues that are like a little bit lower scoring, I got him late, way later than you should have been able to get him. And I'm pumped about it. I am pumped. I'm like, I can't believe I got him where I got him. In a few leagues, I mean, he was dropping 4th, 5th, 6th round in some of my IDP leagues just because people were like, don't know about the injury. And a lot of these leagues drafted early because it was rookie drafts. So it was before the Ebicon injury. And so people were like, I don't know how much. I'm pumped that I have him. I think that is a great call by you.
And I briefly touched on the fact that, hey, DeForest Buckner, if you look at Fantasy Pros IDP scoring, he finished as the number 6 defensive lineman with 45 solo tackles, 36 assisted, 8 sacks, 7 pass deflections, which that is kind of interesting. Didn't really associate him with that, but hey, that's fantastic with an average of 10.8 points per game. Your Indianapolis Colts, man, this team is like stocked full of good IDP options here. If we take it back to the next level,
the secondary is a mess. I mean, the secondary is a mess,
though?
but the D line and linebackers, you're going to get points. And I tell people this all the time. DeForest Buckner, is he a great IDP player? Yes, especially in a defensive tackle league where you guys are D tackle. He's a monster. He might be one of the 5 most important defensive players to a team in the entire league. When he's not on the Colts, it's a whole nother world. I mean, teams run all over him. It's like they lost their identity. When he has missed time the last couple of years since he came over in the trade, I think it was with the Niners.
Yeah.
It's a totally different team. I mean, DeForest Buckner, I don't think people realize what an absolute beast that guy is in the middle. He is an awesome specimen. I think Indy's really good up front. The secondary is just, I hate to say that I'm ripping on secondary. They're just young. I mean, all rookies, all second-year guys. Not a ton of them drafted real high. I'm not totally out on them. They're going to need to learn on the run. It's going to be a little iffy this year, but man, I love their front line. I absolutely love their front line, and I love their linebackers.
So let's jump to the secondary before we get back to the middle of the field. Look, for real football purposes, I can commiserate with you there. But for IDP, there are two names that I am okay acquiring as my DB1, DB2 in that order, and I'm pretty sure I can still get them pretty late in my drafts, or at least the middle-ish rounds when everybody's going through their IDP waves of selecting players. And that's one starting with Julian Blackmon. He gave us a little bit of a scare in training camp because they saw him getting some snaps at free safety, which was like, no, you finally figured things out at strong safety, at box safety. You had a great role last year. You look at the performance last year. Let me pull it up right here. Fantasy Pros IDP scoring. He finished as the defensive back, 17, averaging 11.2 points per game. Whatever they needed to unlock with him, they unlocked with him, moving him closer to the line of scrimmage as the box safety with 65 solo tackles, 23 assisted, 18 pass breakups. That is fantastic. And another guy that people, I can't quit. And I get he is becoming more of a guy that you want in cornerback specific leagues, as opposed to being the guy who has been able to be someone who floats between both. Kenny Moore, Kenny Moore, again, he's somebody who I think has great upside as a cornerback in defensive back leagues, but now probably more so than previously before. Love to get your thoughts on those two guys there.
Yeah, I'll go Kenny Moore first. I mean, the entire reason you love to play IDP leagues is you get a performance like Kenny Moore had last year, week 9, with 2 pick sixes, a 50-point performance on defense was magical for me in a couple leagues. I mean, that's where you're like, this is why IDP is awesome.
Right.
Love Kenny Moore. Kenny Moore feels like, I still think Kenny Moore's really solid. I feel like Devin Weatherspoon is like that younger, gonna be Kenny Moore, because again, they're playing that nickel, so Kenny Moore's playing closer to the line. I still think he's solid. I think people are a little out on him. He had a 1 or 2 down years. He really came back strong last year. Yeah. Real solid season. He especially, he's really the mentor and the old guy in that secondary. Right. I really like him. I think people are forgetting about him. Blackmon is the steal right now. People still are forgetting about him. I've seen him drop so far in drafts or go undrafted. And here's the thing with him, and it's not his fault. He started his career as a free safety. They moved him to strong safety. The only reason he plays more free safety sometimes is because they don't have another good free safety. They drafted Nick Cross out of Maryland, one of your guys, super athletic, super talented guy. He just hasn't been able to put it together yet. And they really drafted him as the strong safety with Blackmon to be the free.
Right, exactly.
Now in Indy, if you're watching, they have decided that they're going to just move those guys around. They're going to intermingle. So it's one play, Blackmon might drop deep. One play, Cross might drop deep. And they're going to play both guys doing both things. I want guys that are playing their players the best places they can play, that they can make plays. I'm not super worried about with Blackmon. I think he's going to play closer to the ball more times than not. But it is a little worrisome when he plays some deep. But we said the same thing about Antoine Winfield last year. He played a lot of free safety and still came up in blitz and still made a lot of plays. I think that's Blackmon. I think Blackmon, outside of Kenny Moore, is by far their best player in the secondary. To me, he is a steal. If you're waiting on DB in your drafts, especially redraft leagues, Blackmon is a great guy to just put on your list late. People are forgetting about him. He's kind of falling, but I think he is going to get a lot of points. Again, I think the Colts are going to be in a ton of shootouts this year. I really do. So I think their IDP are going to score a lot of points. I think all these guys are going to put up points because I just think they're going to be back and forth contests where these guys are getting a ton of tackles, ton of pass deflections, a lot of that. So I like Blackmon a ton. I think he's the big slayer. But Kenny Moore, don't forget about him, especially in cornerback leagues. He is a great, but he's a guy like Witherspoon. He's on my list that I want him even in just a DB league because he is really technically kind of that third outside backer for the Colts. They almost always play 2 linebacker. They almost run a 4-2 nickel. That's just what they do. And so Kenny Moore's always playing close to the line. He's on the slot receiver. We know what the NFL wants to do. They want to give their slot receiver the ball. Kenny Moore's going to get a lot of tackles, a lot of pass deflections, and hopefully a lot of picks like he did last year. He was real solid. So I like both those guys a ton. And we might as well get to my guy.
Yeah.
All over the Colts, which I have to tell you, Jorge, we did not talk about this before the episode started. I'm in heaven. You know me, I want to talk Colts all day long. So I'm all for the shoes. So I was like, let's just keep going with this.
Nice. Yeah. So I mean,
I'll
go.
I
don't want to get in the way of your excitement. Go for it.
So my guy in this list is EJ Speed. Small town school, Tarleton State, came in kind of like a converted safety linebacker. I tell you what, I am a huge Darius Shaq Leonard fan. When he got cut last year by the Colts, it was, as an IDP person, as a Colts fan, man, it hurt. I mean, the freak, man, that guy just made plays everywhere. He won me so many leagues. Hard to see him go, just really struggled to get back from the back injury. And I tell you what, once he got cut, I realized, okay, I know what the Colts are doing, because EJ Speed was a lot better. He was a lot better than Darius Leonard last year. Once you saw him on the field and Leonard was out of the picture and they felt like they could play Speed the whole time, he was a whole lot better. And he was prime IDP linebacker material down the stretch. And Franklin is one of my boys, Syracuse guy, another guy. Love him. EJ Speed is way cheaper, and I would not be shocked if they almost score the same amount of points or if Speed slightly outscores them this year. I really wouldn't, because Speed was phenomenal down the stretch last year.
Yeah, I have EJ Speed currently as my LB21, and I am so happy that's my linebacker 21. And the thing is, like you said, much like him and Julian Blackmon, he's not the first name that you're thinking about, in your IDP drafts, unless you read our profiles, player profile articles, listen to us on Shoot the Gap, praise these guys left and right. Which, if you haven't been, I'd start doing that now if you want to win your fantasy football leagues.
I got Speed 25 in my linebacker rankings, and I have to be honest with you. I looked it up the other day, and I was like, I'm too low on him. I'm too low. I think I'm too low. I think he should be at least 5 spots higher. As I looked at some of the guys I had ahead of him, I'm like, I would draft him over him. I would draft him over that guy. I would draft him over that guy. So I have him at 25 on my list right now, and I actually think I'm too low on him.
Here's the thing. People think the Indianapolis Colts, I guarantee you at linebacker, the first person they think about is Zaire Franklin.
Yep.
And like you said, they don't remember that, yes, Franklin had a hot start to the season, but it was EJ Speed who finished the stronger of the two for IDP purposes. So yeah, give me all the EJ Speed and the thing is, value.
Speed is the value, but also they forget Speed is playing Darius Leonard's old position. He's playing that weak side linebacker where they're like letting him sprint all over the field and make plays. Franklin has to worry about the run. He's got to get in and get the run. Speed is the guy that they're going to blitz. He's the guy that's going to be the turnover guy that's going to get you all the other stuff. Franklin's going to get you tackles, and I love Zaire Franklin. Don't get me wrong.
Right.
I love him, but Speed is going to be the guy. You got to think about it this way. When it was old school Shaq Leonard before he went back to Darius, Shaq Leonard and Bobby Okereke.
Yeah.
Okereke was the tackler. Leonard was the guy running around making all the plays. That's right. What we have now. Franklin's the Okereke. He's the guy that's on the line, making tackles in the run game, and Speed's the guy running around making all the plays. That's what we have to think about that. If he can be 75% of the old Shaq Leonard, you're getting a steal at his ADP.
100%. Man, I feel like we could just talk about the Colts all day long. Who's somebody that
No problem with it. We'll make this a
Yeah,
full
I'm sure
coach
you
show.
don't have a problem with it.
It's all my
I'm
cool
sure
stuff in
you
the
definitely don't
background.
have a problem with it. All right, tell me one of your guys that's not on the Indianapolis Colts that you're excited for this fantasy football season.
One of the other guys I got, and I just think, I mean, he's going undrafted almost everywhere. He's a guy not on many people radar. This is my deep sleeper. This is my guy deep sleeper.
Yeah,
And it's Benton, defensive tackle, Pittsburgh Steelers. Second round pick out of Wisconsin. The Steelers, if you've been paying attention the last couple of years, they love to take Wisconsin guys. They got some hookups with the coaching staff. They know those players well. Keanu Benton was a guy that they took in the second round. People were like, oh, okay. Not a huge name, but a guy that people like, the athletic ability, like what he did. He's really more of a defensive tackle. He's kind of like a four tech. But with the Steelers work, they already got a couple guys that play that. They got a guy named Cam Hayward. They got a Obajobi. So he just out of pure necessity, they made him play nose tackle last year. Real solid. If you watched any of their games during the preseason, he was an absolute menace. He was an absolute menace from nose tackle, which if you're a 3-4 nose tackle, that's usually the first guy I don't want in IDP. I don't ever want the nose tackle on a 3-4 team. They're just run stuffers. They're not doing anything. Right. Benton is a guy that puts pressure on the ball. He makes tackles. He is so quick for his size. And here's the thing. If Cam Hayward ends up hanging it up in the next year or so, which I love Cam. I don't want to see him go, but he's getting up there in age. If Benton slides over to Cam's spot at the DN and goes in leagues where he counts as a defensive tackle, going to be nice. It's going to be real nice. So leagues that are like defensive tackle, like have a little higher end, like premium, I was all over Benton as like one of my late picks, last picks, or a guy I picked up off waivers. He's a guy that just didn't have a lot of stats last year, but man, I'm telling you, I watched a lot of Steelers, and he is a guy that is menacing. He is so menacing. I think he's in for a big defensive tackle season. He reminds me a ton of DeForest Buckner. To go back to the Colts, he reminds me a lot of. If he played in a 4-3 system or a 4-2, I think you would see totally difference, because if they had another run stuffer and he was able to kind of play that 4 tech instead of that 1 tech, I think you would see a lot more out of him, because they don't let him pass rush, but he can. He can, and he makes tackles. He's a sneaky stash for me right now. I'm telling everyone, especially if you're in dynasty leagues, I'm like, stash him. Or if you're in a defensive tackle start league where you're just looking for like a second or third defensive tackle just to put on your roster just in case, he's the guy I'm picking up. Put him in, put him on your bench, see what he does, because he could be a sneaky, sneaky good play this year at D tackle.
No, I love that call. Speaking of another defensive lineman, I think this will probably round out our My Guys episode for tonight. Unless you have a couple more, in which case, you know what? Let's keep going. My guy is Malcolm Kuntz. I look for the Las Vegas Raiders, edge defender playing opposite Max Crosby. You know, the Raiders brought in Christian Wilkins in free agency and tackle. So you got three awesome, really good performing defensive linemen in Kuntz, Wilkins, and Max Crosby on the other side. One of the things I wanted to look at was just like how well he was producing it down the stretch. And it just so happens it's not all the time that when you look at, PFF grades and you look at fantasy point scoring that you see some overlap. Sometimes there are some really bad players from an NFL play perspective that are really good for IDP. And then there are some, and then the opposite is also true. This is not the case. Malcolm Kuntz, from weeks 13 on, he had games of 20, 30 points, 12 points, 11 points. You look at his PFF grades in terms of where he ranked amongst all these guys like Myles Garrett, Khalil Mack, Micah Parsons, Josh Hines Allen. He was right there as the edge rusher 14. with 23 total pressures, 6 sacks. You know, what I like most about him is that he reminds me of somebody who I kind of told people about a few years ago that also finished the season strong. And I was predicting that he was going to come out last year and carry on his dominant ways and still be a value in drafts was Carl Granderson. You know, Carl Granderson playing opposite of Cameron Jordan. You know, let's just say how it is for IDP fantasy football purposes. Cameron Jordan is a name, not so much somebody that you're going to be targeting in your drafts or even trying to pick up on the waiver wire. But he is somebody who demands and attracts attention from a real football perspective, which frees up Carl Granderson for those one-on-one matchups. And he won a lot of those matchups down the stretch. I see this in Malcolm Kuntz. I see he's Carl Granderson 2.0 and somebody that you can get really late in your drafts. In terms of where he is ranked currently by me, let me pull it up right now. And of course, folks, you can head over to fantasyandframes.com and check out our IDP draft rankings. Malcolm Kuntz right now is the defensive lineman 25 for me. So I needless to say, very high on him. And if you're able to get the DL 25, you know, in the later rounds of your IDP fantasy football draft, I think you just, again, another player you can get a tremendous steal on and get great value for him going forward. Are you drinking the Kool-Aid on Malcolm Kuntz, or is it one of those things?
I tell you what, I think I was late. I was late to Malcolm Kuntz. I really was. I was like, oh man, I don't know if I totally believe on it. And I think I'm coming around. I definitely am way too low on him in my rankings. And the more I look at his stats, the more I look at kind of what he did down the stretch, being opposite Max Crosby, he's an absolute steal in drafts right now. I see people just ignoring him, and I see them taking some old players way in front of him. I think he's just, especially if you haven't done your research and going off like your rankings or some of like my rankings, and you're just going off like straight ADP on like my fantasy league, he is nowhere to be found. You're gonna miss him. He's way down the list. Yeah. He's way down there. He's an absolute steal. I'll be honest. I was not as high on him, and then I saw everybody else kind of start ranking him a little higher. I was like, I need to reevaluate him. I think you're right. I think he's a steal for where he could finish. IDP and defensive end wise, and where he's going is insane value. Even if he has a very okay season, he's not going to kill you where you're getting him. You know, in drafts, I saw drafts he didn't even get taken. Like he really didn't get taken. Yeah. I was like, okay. I was like, that's my first waiver wire. It's like if I was in like deeper drafts and I had to make a couple other positions to make sure I had enough starters, I was like, oh, he's first guy off my waiver wire when I'm picking guys. I like it. I like that call a lot. Like I said, I just looked at my rankings. I realized I'm way too low, and I'm ashamed to even say what I have him ranked. I got to move him up because I think he's way better than where I have him currently.
Going back to Fantasy Pro scoring, the guy averaged 14. It's from weeks 13 through 18 when they finally started giving him more play on the field. 14.1 points per game, the DL3, 14 solo tackles to 3 assists. So that's good. I like to know that my guy can get 2 solo tackles and 6 sacks. Folks, get ahead of the curve, get ahead of the crowd if you can. If you have the bench space, obviously, you know, if you have a shallow bench in your IDP league, he's somebody that you're going to probably click on his name on whatever app you're using and do the bookmark for just to keep an eye on him, because he probably will be written up in a waiver article at some point this season, if not a starter sit or player fade as we're doing this year. Just if you have the bench space, he's definitely somebody you should pick up. I really think you're going to get plenty of value, like JT was saying, with Malcolm Kuntz here from the Las Vegas Raiders. JT, you got one more for us? Or
I'm going to mention 2 guys. These are not like guarantees by any means, but 2 guys I really like that the opportunity arises, I think could absolutely crush. So first guy is Troy Anderson, linebacker of the Falcons. We know that's a mess. We don't know who's starting there. You've got Landman, you got Kate Ellis. When Anderson started last year, off the charts to start the season at linebacker. Then got hurt, missed the whole year. Now they're not sure he's starting. He was a guy that was getting taken really high last year in a ton of drafts. He's dropped way low because no one knows what's going on. Talk to anybody from Montana, the state of Montana, they're like, dude, he's the greatest player ever from here. Montana State legend, played quarterback, running back, line. I did literally played every position in college at Montana State. I just think he's a superior athlete if he's healthy. He's a guy that I'm keeping an eye on, or I'm actually taking as like one of my late linebackers, just because if he ends up winning the spot and playing, he has shown that he's a 10 tackle a game guy. Like he is that type of player. So he's a guy I want to keep an eye on. If you don't draft him and he doesn't go draft in your league, that's the first guy I want to pay attention to, because if he ends up starting week 1 for Atlanta, you're going to see everybody jumping on board trying to get him. So that's a guy I tell everybody to keep an eye on. The other guy, he's going to need a little injury help, but man, when he played last year, he was good. And that's Tuli Tuapalutu. I know I'm tough name. Los Angeles Chargers out of USC. Right now, he technically backs up Khalil Mack and Bosa. But man, when Bosa got hurt and banged up last year, he started. Oh, he was dangerous. He was dangerous, and he was another guy that was just popped off the film in preseason. Just was all over the place, wreaking havoc. He's a guy I want. I'm stashing him because, again, we've seen the Bosa injury concerns. Khalil Mack was just unreal last year, but he's not a young buck either. This is the guy I want. He's a future. He's got a shot at being a future top 10 defensive end. If he can put it all together and get on the field, he has a ton of talent. Former second round pick out of USC. I really, really like. He's only 21. So young still. I mean, he's just blooming, blossom. I think him being around those guys helps him too. He's learning a ton. That's a guy, even if you don't draft him, because technically he's not the starter, put him on your watch list, have him sitting there, because the second something happens to Bosa or they come in and say, oh, Bosa's out,
right,
boom, you want to snag him up. Those are two guys. Injury concerns, plus, they need some help to make sure they're in the starting lineup. But if they get the green light, I'm all go on them. I love both those guys.
Very nice, very nice. Okay, well, that's going to wrap up our guys episode here for IDP Fantasy Football for the 2024 NFL season. Folks, so a little bit of programming news. You will see Shoot the Gap, our week 1 episode on Wednesday. You will see it at our normal time of 10 p.m. You will not see us live, however, because we got either fantasy drafts, or yours truly is spending the last week before the season kicks off in Las Vegas. For those who are in Las Vegas, fans of Fantasy and Frames, I'm sure I'll be wearing a t-shirt on a strip. Don't be afraid. Come up, ask some fantasy football questions. And also for those who, want to party, hit me up at Jorge B. Edwards on Twitter.
Absolutely. Hit him up.
I haven't been to Vegas since 2009, so needless to say, things have changed.
Oh, yeah, it's going to be wild. I'm so jealous. I used to go every year in my 20s with my brother and my brother-in-law. We used to go every year, a yearly trip, and stopped going. Haven't been in quite a few years. Went to go for my 40th birthday for the NFL draft. Freaking COVID. COVID hit.
Oh, no.
Totally blew it up. It ruined my whole trip. All my friends were going. My cousin, we had it all set up. It was going to be great. Missed out. So got to get back out there. Now it's been way too long since I've been out there. So I'm jealous. I definitely want to get back out there again. We're coming up on the 20th year anniversary of my home league draft of all the guys that were in high school with me, that we started up a draft when I moved back in town and started JT Walker's Brewery, my restaurant brewery. So we're coming up on 20 years, and I'm working everybody, start telling your wife now. Tell her now we're going to Vegas in 2 years for the 20th anniversary Dog Pound Fantasy Football Draft. So hopefully we're going to get it, man. I had a couple friends that went out there. I got a buddy who's in a couple leagues with me. His friends went out there. They went to Circa, the sports bar, out at the pool, did the draft outside. I was taking pictures. I was like, that looks so awesome. I was like, man, that looks great. I got to get out there and do that one day.
Yeah, no, I'm looking forward to it. I think quite a few. I think there are a few members of the Fantasy and Frames family who'll be joining me, so it's going to be fun. But anyhow, going back to Shoot the Gap, we're going to record our Week 1 episode in the next few days here. So if there's any breaking news that happens between now and next Wednesday, we apologize. But we will be back live at our usual time on the following week for Week 2. But we're still going to put out here at Fantasy and Frames an early waiver wire article for Week 1. Yes, we know games haven't been played. Yes, we know that players that you've drafted are probably going to be starting for you. That doesn't mean recent news can't affect what your thoughts are on having some depth at various positions. Maybe some of the players that we've talked about are still available in your drafts. Maybe some of the players we've written about. Gary Davenport, the godfather of IDP, put out an article here at fantasyandframes.com where he's talking about late round deep sleepers for your IDP leagues. So if you have large benches, you know what? Put these guys on.
This is the time, Jorge. You're right. This is the time. Get on before the season starts, and these guys have a good first game, and everybody's putting in waiver wire money, and now all of a sudden you're like on the fab, and you're like, I could have got that guy for $1 last week, and now I'm spending $28 on him. Yep. Now's the time. This is the time where I'm like scouring rookies. I'm scouring backups that like a guy in front of them might be hurt that could have a good year. This is the time to pick those guys up if you got extra bench spots. Put your guys in IR. Guys are hurt, move them. Pick up those guys now before the season starts. Hey, if they never get on the field, they bomb. You can drop them. You can drop them and get somebody else. But get them now before you have to fight everybody else for them.
100%. And our plays and fades will also go out next week on Wednesday. So be in store for that. And then, after we finish up Week 1, which will be with our kickoff show, which we do every year, 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. on Sundays, covering every game, every fantasy relevant player on offense and defense. We'll be back for Week 2 live. So looking forward to it. Looking forward to kicking off the season with you all. And thank you very much for tuning in to Shoot the Gap all off season. But this is what we've been doing. This is what we're here for. It's all culminating this coming week.
It's go time.
It is go time.
Week 1. Here we go.
Yep. And speaking of go time, that's going to do it for us. So for JT, I'm Jorge. We will see you next time on Shoot the Gap.